Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Red Zone podcast. Hope everybody's having a good morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you're listening. I am Gray Lanero. I am your host. Don't want to dilly-dally too much. I have something that I really want to talk about, so let's not waste too much time. New Orleans has a team sitting at number 1 in the standings, and it's not the Saints. The New Orleans Pelicans are 18-9 and number 1 in the West, tied with the Memphis Grizzlies right now. And woo! I am excited. I love this team. Oh man, they get me pumped. So the New Orleans Pelicans, 6-1 in their last 7, 18-9. One of the best teams in the league in terms of point differential, in terms of net rating, in terms of record, in terms of all of the metrics that have the highest correlation to winning the NBA championship and playoff success. The Pelicans are one of the best teams in the NBA. And that's something that I think, unlike some others, I would have been prepared for before the season. See, if you would have told me the Pelicans were the 1 seed after 27 games, I would have believed you. You wouldn't have had a second of trouble trying to convince me. Now, what does surprise me is that they have been able to do this without Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram has been out for over half the season. Brandon Ingram was out for all of the Pelicans' 6-game winning streak that ended last night at the Jazz, as well as Herb Jones. This team has got some special depth. So just to recap what the Pelicans have been up to lately, they are in the midst of the toughest stretch of their schedule all season. We have a 6-game stretch. We are through 3 of those games, but the first 3 were a doubleheader versus the Suns, then a doubleheader at the Jazz, then a game at the Bucks, then at the Suns. So the toughest 6-game stretch that the Pelicans will have all season, about as tough of a 6-game stretch as you can have. And the Pelicans, without Brandon Ingram, without Herb Jones until last night, and he was back in a limited capacity. You could still tell he wasn't 100%, but it was good to have him back. He was very active on defense. He looked very good. You know I love me some Herb Jones. So being able to maintain this without an all-star, without your second-best scorer by far, without your second-best player by far, while your third-best player, CJ McCollum, he's not in the form of his life. Let's get that clear. He's had one really good game during this stretch. Otherwise, all season he's been rough. So this is a team that, despite all the injury luck that's been thrown at them, despite however any player is playing, whether they're in bad form, whether they're giving us unexpected minutes, Willie Green and this team have been able to work together and get contributions from everyone on the roster to get us to this point where we're tied for the first seed. This is a special team. This is something that I've been waiting for ever since we drafted Zion, since we traded for BI, because those are building blocks that you can build a truly elite team on. Zion Williamson, I run out of words at times. Zion Williamson won Western Conference Player of the Week last week. He averaged 33 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists on 70% field goal percentage. Yes, 70%. One of the most absurd things you'll ever hear, but you could say that about most stats you will read about Zion. On the season, he's chilling at 25 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists at 61 field goal percentage. 61 field goal percentage is 12th in the league. All 11 players with higher field goal percentages have significantly lower volume. Zion Williamson is the most efficient scorer in the NBA. Zion Williamson is probably the most efficient scorer in NBA history. That is not an exaggeration, and if you actually look at statistics, there's only a few players that even have an argument. Zion Williamson is also 22 years old. He has struggled with injuries throughout, and he is still at this level. When he reaches his prime, he will be one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. The issue will be his availability, not his ability. He has continually proven everyone wrong at every turn who has doubted him for whatever reason they choose, whatever hill they would like to die on, however they would like to be wrong, whether he doesn't want to be in New Orleans, whether he's not a diverse enough scorer, whether he can't be a number one option on a winning team. You got to realize when are these people just going to appreciate what Zion Williamson is? And that's one of the most special, unique, irreplicable talents you will ever see in the NBA. You will never, ever see another player like Zion Williamson. And you can really appreciate that, because when people compare Zion Williamson to someone, it's always X but or X and, because you can't, no other player that's played before Zion Williamson has been like this. You'll hear Shaq, but he's got ball handling and he's shorter. Or you'll hear Larry Johnson if he could perform, if he had ball handling skills and agility. Or Charles Barkley if he was a truly, truly elite ball handler. Charles Barkley is the best comparison. But even with how good of an athlete Chuck was in his prime, Chuck wouldn't want himself to be compared to Zion athletically. Zion has continued to carry this team at times while Brandon Ingram has been out. Not having a true number two option has been a serious problem for us through this season. CJ McCollum has had very few games where he's performed like it, and with Brandon Ingram out for most of the season, you'd think that would have been a problem. I would have, if you would have told me that was going to happen before the season. We're still the 1 seed. Now, got a long way to go. This is a problem for me especially, because I am very bad about pacing myself during an NBA season. I'm used to watching football. In football, you have 17 games, you have 12 games, whatever it is, plus postseason. Every game matters in college football. Almost every game matters in the NFL as well. Basketball is a lot different. 82 games, you've got some games that you just are going to lose, and it's fine. So normally that's a tough thing for me to accept, but with this team, even on the bad nights, I can watch them, and I can be like, this team's so much better than this. Like, I know this team will come out stronger next time. I trust in the coaching. I trust in the players. I know we're not even fully healthy. So this is a special Pelicans team. This is a special, special team with a truly, truly special player at the helm. And I can't wait to see what it looks like when Brandon Ingram gets back. Now, the Pelicans aren't perfect. And I will be the first to tell you this. My friends could tell you when I watch them, they'll know they aren't perfect because of how much I talk about it. The most obvious but least pressing issue, I would say, is that we don't have a true number two option when Zion's out. Or when Brandon Ingram's out. However, that's obviously we have issues when Brandon Ingram is out. Considering how much he's been out, we've done better than we should have. So that's a non-issue. That's just stating the obvious. That's why we lost versus the Jazz last night. But what we do need to improve, and what could prove to be an issue long-term if we don't fix it, is the three-point shooting. This team has to be better from three. Right now, Trey Murphy is in the middle of a very, very cold streak. CJ McCollum is in the middle of a very cold streak from 3. Alvarado is shooting okay on incredibly low volume. Najee is shooting well on pretty low volume from 3. So sometimes you get the 3-point performances, but the Pelicans are the lowest in the league in 3-point attempts. They have been all season. They are bottom half in 3-point percentage. So we're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the NBA, and we definitely need to improve there. Now, that may mean that we're going to have to make some moves. Brandon Ingram coming back will help. That will not be enough. He is a good 3-point shooter. He will take a couple shots a game, maybe make a couple. But he's not an out-and-out 3-point threat that is going to just completely change the game when he gets back. We are going to need to look for some established wing options who are deadly from behind the arc. The top options I've seen are Bojan Bogdanovic and Saddiq Bey. Saddiq Bey, a very young player who's shown on a couple occasions, more than a couple really, but a couple in particular, that he could be a truly elite scoring threat. 2 50-point games in his career, in his young career. Bojan Bogdanovic is a renowned 3-point threat, has consistently been on challenging teams. He is the dream for me. He is the player who I would love to have coming off our bench, who I would love to use it as an alternative option in the starting 5 if we need 3-point shooting. He's the dream for me. Now, what would we have to give up? It's tough to know. Picks aren't a problem. Obviously we've got second rounders. We've got late firsts that we could deal straight up. So there's some options for us. Obviously not a lot of players that will want to deal. But, that's up to David Griffin and Trajan Langdon. So we'll see where they get to with the roster, what moves they like, what moves they think are necessary. But this is a special Pelicans team that's making me feel some type of way, a way that I have not felt in a long time about the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm super excited, but man, I'm just scared to be hurt because this franchise has hurt me so many times before. But what I've tried to learn about this year's team and this team under Willie Green is that they are not the same team that we've used to be. Is that they are not the same team we are used to. This team is special, and while we've got some areas to work, the start speaks for itself. We're a great, great team, and I'm so excited to see where we go from here. Now, if you didn't gather from last year, LSU is going to be pretty active in the transfer portal. And, we've still got a bit to clean up on the recruiting trail as well. So this is a pretty big time right now for LSU recruiting. We've had 9 names enter the portal, or we have 9 names in the portal to leave. 7 have entered since the season ended. 2 were already there. The more prominent names will be Derek Davis, Ray Jones, Marcus Dumerville, Jack Besh. And some talent there, for sure. Jack Besh, the most notable, had some great performances in his freshman year. Sophomore year, put up some stats, but was way further down the depth chart than I think some people expected. Ray Jones was a nice 4-star prospect out of Mississippi. I was super excited about his athleticism when he got here. Never managed to break through. He's recently announced his transfer to Mississippi State. Derek Davis was the number 2 safety in the country behind Sage Ryan when he committed. Man, I had high hopes for him and for Sage Ryan. I was super excited about that duo. And I don't want to say disappointment because there's so much ahead of those two for their career and they have so much time left, but man, it was a bit disappointing for me that they didn't take over our defensive backfield like I had hoped when we had recruited them. It was a shame. And then Marcus Dumerville, 4-star offensive tackle prospect, never really looked like he was going to get his way into the lineup. At times, we tried to convert him to like a blocking tight end, so you could kind of tell that was coming. Most of these, to be clear, most of these we have seen coming the entire year. Not really a lot of surprises in terms of LSU's transfer portal entries. Now, the problem is that a lot of these entries into the portal and a lot of entries that we've had in the past that are already gone are from the notorious 2020 recruiting class. And I'm just going to read that off real quick because I think you need to really hear it to get an appreciation of what has happened. In 2020, LSU scored the number 4 recruiting class in the country. On paper, one of LSU's best classes in the past decade. Went all over, got some of the best players from around the country. A very exciting class. And I'll start from the top and I'll read every name. Eric Gilbert, gone. Eli Ricks, gone. Kayshon Boutte, by far the biggest success here. An amazing wide receiver, a first or second round talent, and coming back for his senior season. Obviously, Kayshon is not the problem here. Then you've got Jaquelin Roy, another success here. And now you're like, okay, well, two of the top 4 marquee recruits were successes. What's so bad about this? Now we get to the mud. Now we get to the grime of this class. Philip Webb, never played, transferring. Jordan Tolles, barely ever played, transferring. BJ Ojulari, huge success. Jacobian Guillory has rarely played, been underwhelming in my opinion, but still here. Antoine Sampa, transfer. Marcus Dumerville, transfer. Kavontre Bradford, absolute nightmare. Left, came back, gone again. Josh White, transferred without ever playing. Max Johnson, don't even get me started on Max Johnson. Max Johnson's gone. Eric Taylor has not played. Dwight McGlothern was great, transferred to Arkansas. Coy Moore was solid, transferred to Auburn. Marlon Martinez, decent. He's okay. He plays he's a backup. He plays. Alex Adams, transferred. Cole Taylor in the transfer portal. Ali Gay, huge disappointment. Xavier Hill, he's also just there, kind of. He's like a rotational piece, which is solid, I guess. And then TJ Finley, transferred to Auburn. Yikes. That is rough. And if it weren't for a few players who have really taken the mantle of that class on their back and have had legendary careers, specifically Kayshon and Ojulari, and to a lesser extent, Jaquelin Roy, it would be a nightmare of a class, right? You know, there's not a lot of positives from that class, and that has been a huge reason that transfers have been so necessary for Brian Kelly since he's gotten here, and why it feels like we have no depth. Our junior class, the class that is supposed to be the backbone for this team, is non-existent. It's gone. It's fugazi. It's not real. And so we have had to be incredibly active in the transfer portal. And we've had to rely on hoping that these young players that we recruit are going to be able to immediately have impact. And that's a huge problem. And that's the reason that you need to appreciate the guys in that class who stuck around, who stuck it out, like Kayshawn, like J. Roy, like BJ Ojolari, and like Guillory and Marlon Martinez and Xavier Hill. Those guys, even if they're just rotational pieces, they are what we needed from the rest of that class. They are the backbone that we needed from the other 15 guys in the class. So it's really important to appreciate those guys. Now, the high school recruiting is a bit more clear at this point. The end of this class has a few names that we would love to get. We'd love to finish with Javian Toviano, Desmond Ricks, Isaac Smith, and Nichols Harbor. In fact, that's what Shea Dixon has us finishing with, is Nichols Harbor, Isaac Smith, Javian Toviano, and Desmond Ricks. And that would be a great finish to the class. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't think we get all four of those. I'm very worried about Nichols Harbor and Desmond Ricks. Now, Desmond Ricks is really, really the one that is probably the closest to a toss-up now. He just took his official visit to Alabama this weekend, and news is all over the place about what he's thinking. Some sources have said that LSU still leads for him. There have been some sources that are saying Bama and Florida have an equal chance at him. It's way too early to know what's really going to happen. His decision comes on the 22nd, so it's only a week and a day from now. Some big progress to be monitored there. LSU seems to still be in the lead, but Bama and Florida both have realistic shots at him, especially Bama after their most recent visit. Toviano feels a bit more safe, as does Isaac Smith. Nichols Harbor is going to be tough. He is right now looked at to be a pretty, safe call to go to Michigan or South Carolina. But LSU's in there at really the third option. And it's been inching towards sort of a toss-up for a bit. So they find themselves in an interesting spot on both of those guys where if they land both, they're a top 3 class and one of the best recruiting classes in the country. If they land one, we're fine. If they land 0, that's a tough loss to take when you need both D-end and defensive back depth. So big spots to monitor. Now, for transfer recruiting, there have been 2 names that I have seen a lot of. 2 names that really make sense too, right? Denver Harris, the defensive back out of A&M, who originally was considering LSU and was thought to be going to LSU for a while. Look, I have nothing to say aside from the fact that I am against taking Denver Harris. I think Denver Harris is an absolute locker room nightmare. He live streamed video of him driving 60 miles per hour in a parking garage the night before the Miami game earlier in the season. He was smoking weed in the locker room. He is a absolute nightmare, and I just do not want someone like that on the team. But with that said, LSU desperately needs defensive back talent. If the coaching staff believes that they can get him to buy in and he will be aligned with the program, then it's something you could really use. And it's a player and a talent that will be huge to LSU next year. So that's one that's a bit testy. Now, one I am much, much more headstrong in hoping for is Josiah Stewart out of Coastal Carolina. Now, Josiah Stewart was a 3-star recruit out of Massachusetts. So he wasn't a nobody, but he also wasn't a blue chip. And he went to Coastal Carolina, and in his first 2 years, he's accumulated 72 tackles, 16 and a half sacks. He's really, really performed for them. And now he has got a top 3 of Michigan, USC, and LSU. So you can really tell by that top 3, this guy's a very wanted commodity in a spot that LSU needs. We need DNs. Next year, I think that Savion Jones will probably start. I think maybe Quincy Wiggins could fill the position that Ali Gay played. But beyond that, the roster is sparse. And even the starters would be, you'd feel okay with them, but you don't know what to think really. So getting Josiah Stewart would be huge as an edge option. He's someone that I really view as kind of a need. Getting him, definitely a huge part of this class. Almost as big, I would say, as any of the freshmen that we're recruiting left. So, Ricks, Harbor, Harris, Stewart, all really up in the air. Those are the names that you're going to want to keep an eye on for the next few weeks in recruiting. Now, I thought about starting with this, but I didn't think it felt right because I feel like I'm not offering anything that anybody else hasn't already said. And I didn't want to just start and do a whole segment that's 15 minutes long memorializing Coach Leach and talking about how he changed the world and what he did specifically to change offenses around the country. But what I do want to talk about is my experience watching Coach Leach and what college football was like from the second I started watching because of him. Now, I started watching college football from a very young age, but even so, that doesn't mean that I ever got to watch before Coach Leach's influence was felt around the college football world. I was born in 1998. I remember watching college football as early as 6 or 7. Ever since I have been a fan, Mike Leach has been one of the best and most special coaches in college football. I remember him most fondly from his time at Texas Tech with Graham Harrell, Michael Crabtree, the unbelievable offenses that he orchestrated there, the way he brought them to contending like no other coach could. And when I say that, I mean it. No other coach can do what he does. Mike Leach has more AP top 25 wins as an unranked coach than any other coach in history, and I guarantee you it's not close. He was able to bring programs that did not belong in competitive spots. He brought them there. I think even coaches like Nick Saban and Urban Meyer would tell you that they would struggle to do what Mike Leach did. And again, this is not an exaggeration. Listen to the places that Mike Leach coached. Mike Leach coached in Lubbock. He coached in Pullman. He coached in Starkville. Those schools do not win. But he did. He made those teams competitive. The impact that has on my life, I never knew that Washington State was supposed to be one of the worst Power 5 programs in the country. Because for most of my adult life, they have been decent to good because of him. Even now, after him, they're better than they used to be before him. Texas Tech was a joke before he got there. Now they're a good to decent Power 5 program. And while I've seen Mississippi State have success, he continued it in a way that I don't think I even expected. Because I had my doubts about Mike Leach in the SEC. And I was proven wrong by Mike Leach, as many others had been at various points in his career. Yeah, Mike Leach was a special coach, just as much as he was a special person. And I would love if somehow those aspects of him could be remembered in equal regard. Mike Leach, along with Hal Mumme and Josh Heupel, changed offenses in college football, first with Kentucky, then with Oklahoma. He broke the wishbone in the Big 12. He brought the Big 12 into the next century. And he's mainly the reason that people knew the Big 12 for so long as not having defense, because it was an arms race to catch up with his insane air raid offense that he had implemented at Texas Tech. Mike Leach never won a championship, but he did win 2 AP Coaches of the Year, and he did what many coaches who do win championships never could. He went to programs that had no business competing and made them winners. Now, what people will undoubtedly remember is his personality. And this is one that I sort of felt weird talking about, because for a lot of my life, Mike Leach annoyed me. I didn't love Mike Leach. I loved certain moments. I loved moments from Mike Leach. I loved when he would make jokes and when he would talk about what he was truly passionate about, and when you got to see a look into the mind of a truly unique savant in the manner of football, and you got to get an idea of how his brain worked. He was genuine and honest, but he was short-tempered. He was not perfect. He had problems with players. Aaron James at Texas Tech, Dylan Johnson at Mississippi State. He had his issues, but he coached for over 30 years. No one who does that will not have issues with players, and that's not to absolve him of the mistakes he made, but more to contextualize the time and the impact that he had on the sport. Mike Leach was not perfect by any measure, but man, he was great. He was a special, special person. And though I never, ever got the chance to meet him or interview him or even go to a press conference of his, I'm very disappointed that I never will. So rest in peace to one of the greatest offensive minds in college football and one of the most entertaining personalities that I've ever seen in sports. Caleb Williams cruised to the Heisman Trophy. And I look, I won't pretend like it's a surprise. 2 weeks ago, the episode of my podcast was titled Caleb Williams Claims the Heisman. So we saw this coming. That's not what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about how close the race was. What I do want to talk about is a bit of a narrative that I saw start to form in the past week or two. And one that, if I may, I think is embarrassingly wrong. And I think it's actually very foolish that people have tricked themselves into thinking this is a competition. I heard many people on radio and TV say that they did not understand why this Heisman race was not closer. They called Caleb Williams one of the worst Heisman winners ever. They said that this was not a race decided on merit, but decided on narrative. They said that Duggan should have won it. They said that Duggan and Stroud had similar stats. No, they didn't. And no, they shouldn't. Caleb Williams was the best player in college football this year, and also maybe the most valuable. I don't know why people don't like Caleb Williams. I don't know why people won't appreciate Caleb Williams, but I'll just give you the stats straight up. Max Duggan and CJ Stroud, respectively, had 3,321 and 3,340 passing yards, respectively. Stroud had 75 rushing yards. Duggan had 400. Caleb Williams had 800 more passing yards than either of them, as well as 300 more rushing yards than Stroud and only 30 fewer rushing yards than Duggan. He had 10 more touchdowns than Stroud, 11 more touchdowns than Duggan, as many interceptions as Duggan, 2 fewer interceptions than Stroud, and the same completion rate as both. Caleb Williams deserved the Heisman, and he deserved to win it by as much as he did. There was no argument to be had this year who deserved it. The only argument was by how much and who deserved to be second. Now, an argument that I did agree with and one that was very prominent was, why was Stetson Bennett so high? And I won't be able to explain that because college football fans are archaic and view players through the lens of team victories and refuse to actually use their minds analytically and critically think about what makes a player special beyond a win and a loss. But in terms of the Caleb Williams sort of reverse narrative that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, I'm not sure where that came from, and I'm not sure why it started, because there's not a whole lot of sense there. And that's just something I wanted to talk about, because when you write it out and you really appreciate the teams they were on, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for anybody to even be close to Caleb Williams. Because guess what? He had a worse defense than both of those teams, too. He was on a worse team than either of them. So I think Caleb Williams was a pretty deserving Heisman winner and a pretty great Heisman winner. And I think the only reason people are saying that is because USC missed the playoff. Now, my favorite story this week. Prime time, baby. Deion Sanders signed a deal with Colorado for 5 years, $29.5 million base. And man, am I excited to see what he can do there. A lot of people were surprised he took this. A lot of people, I think, were questioning why now, why Colorado. I don't think it's that difficult to understand. Deion Sanders was making $300,000 a year at Jackson State. Jackson State was paying him well relative to what they could. They're not paying him anything close to what he is going to be making at Colorado. He's going to be making $5.5 million base in his first year. Deion Sanders is going to have access to millions of dollars of funding. He's going to have access to Power 5 facilities. He's going to have access to one of the most beautiful campuses in the country to recruit. And I think he needed this stepping stone. I like Deion as a coach, the idea anyway. But I don't think that he was going to be able to jump straight to a blue blood like a lot of people seem to think that he could. I think Colorado was a bit of a necessary stepping stone. And I think that if you expected him to go straight to a place like Florida State or any other blue blood that he might be connected to, I think you may have been overselling the credit that a Power 5 program will put in an FCS team and their performance. Now, with that said, I think that Deion Sanders will turn Colorado into one of the best programs in the Pac-12, and I believe that very strongly. Deion Sanders was built to be a coach in this era of football, and that's inarguable. Deion Sanders is legendary for being the pioneer of individual branding in American football. He's prime time. He's the guy. Deion Sanders, I didn't get to watch Deion Sanders as a kid, but you can bet the first time I saw Deion play, I saw him have the chains. I saw him showboating in the game. I saw him talking about how cool he was, how good he was. Do you have any idea how cool I thought that was? I thought Deion Sanders was the coolest player on earth because he knew how good he was, and then he went out on the field and backed it up, and he wasn't afraid to talk about it, and I loved every second of it. You can only imagine those players that have that same level of confidence as him, that are ready to take that next step, and they get to play under Deion Sanders, and they get to go to one of the nicest campuses in the country, and they see the success he had at Jackson State. It's only going to be a matter of time before he's recruiting to the level of one of the best programs in the country, and you can see that. He has already had his first 5-star commitment in 5-star receiver out of IMG, Winston Watkins. Cousin of Sammy Watkins, actually. So, recruiting is not going to be a problem. In fact, recruiting, he may change the recruiting game in the context of a program like Colorado. I am super, super eager to see how the Deion experiment goes. Because I think this could be a great move for both Deion and Colorado. And I'd love for it to be, because, man, do I think Deion is just the coolest guy on earth. I love Deion, and I love him just disrupting everything that people hate about college football. I love Deion just being the perfect NIL coach. I love it. I hope he's so successful. I'm super eager to see what he does. World Cup update time. My favorite segment that I do every week at the end of the podcast once I know all the people who only care about football will be gone. I'm just kidding. So, yesterday, Argentina eliminated Croatia, defeated them 3-0 off the back of 2 Julian Alvarez goals, a Messi goal, and 2 assists. They were the 2 standouts. They were the difference. They were special. Messi was Messi. Messi did everything that is so special about him. The game did not start out like Argentina was going to dominate. In fact, in the first 15 to 20 minutes, Croatia not only were probably the better team, they almost looked dominant. The control they had over the game early really made me think, hey, I don't know what Argentina is going to do to score. Because Argentina, to that point, had been unable to get the ball to Messi. They had been unable to get the ball to Alvarez. In fact, in my notes, I had said, this is really concerning that their midfield has been unable to get the ball up there. Because those are their 2 best players, and it's not really close. Messi, obviously, and then Julian Alvarez. the star striker out of Manchester City, who has been a revelation for Argentina at striker, replaced Lautaro Martinez, who has notoriously underwhelmed for Argentina at striker, despite being very good at the club level for Inter Milan. And Messi really decided, hey, I'm going to change that by myself. And Messi started dropping deeper. And he started being a bit more active. And man, were Argentina better off for it. The amount of times Messi would get it at midfield and just... It's so hard to contextualize it because the way he would just get the ball and beat 5 guys in a row and secure possession or create an attack. He did this for the third goal for Argentina, the second goal for Julian Alvarez, where he just abuses Josko Gvardiol en route to a beautiful layoff of an assist, gives Julian Alvarez just a wide open net. Messi wants this World Cup, and he wants it bad. Now, it was a bit of a shame for Croatia, because Luka Modric and Mateo Kovacic were fantastic in the first half. Man, the way they controlled the midfield battle, they really, really were something else. I was truly appreciating getting to watch them. The fluidity and control that they exerted at different points, it's one of my favorite things to watch, is when a team is pressing really hard, and they're pressing well. It's consistent, there's high effort, and the other team's midfield is just so good and offers such technical security that even when they press well, they make some ridiculous touch, or they come up with a move in their brain that a normal midfielder wouldn't think, and they just retain the possession and wear out the press even more. It was beautiful to see how Croatia was working to retain possession, and I believe around the 20th minute they had something like 70% possession. They were absolutely dominating Argentina. But the problem for Croatia throughout this generation for them has been they're too blunt in the attack. And they don't have elite defenders. They have good defenders, but their only elite aspect is they have Livakovic, who's an amazing shot stopper, and they have Modric, Kovacic, and Brozovic, who they offer a truly, truly elite midfield. But after that, some of the areas leave some things to be desired. Some areas I was really disappointed in Croatia. Ivan Perisic was so disappointing. Every time he got the ball, he wasted it. He was someone who, in Russia in 2018, was absolutely terrifying on the ball. One of the best players in the tournament when they made their run to the World Cup final versus France. So seeing him play like that, obviously they weren't going to be great off. Another person who I was disappointed in, I thought Dejan Lovren was perplexing at times with where he positioned himself. I think Josko Gvardiol was very naive in where he defended. A lot of the time he was caught very far out of position. On the second goal from Julian Alvarez, or the first goal, the penalty from Messi that Alvarez drew, as well as the third goal where he had no reason to be so aggressively pressing Lionel Messi of all people. But the person I was most disappointed with, and we don't even have to spend time on this because it's not that important, but man, Croatia were never winning that match with Borna Sosa playing. Talk about a 0 out of 10 performance. Borna Sosa played one of the worst games of football I saw from any player in the entire World Cup. And I would not be ragging on him if this was his only bad game, but he had been the weakness in Croatia's defense the entire tournament. I don't know Croatia's roster. I can't comment on whether there is a better option for them. There might not be. I don't know. I can't imagine there isn't, though. Because, man, he is bad. His crosses were horrendous. His first touch was repulsive. His defending was clueless. On the first goal for Alvarez, he attempts to clear it and just hits it right back to Alvarez, who just taps the ball into the net. He had one of the worst crosses I think I've ever seen in professional football. One of those touches where you truly think, oh, well, it just got deflected. That's actually good. That's a corner. And then they show the replay, and it was inexplicable. He just overhit it by about 40 yards. And I just don't believe that there isn't someone better. Because he was so responsible for so many attacks falling apart. He was directly responsible for the second goal. He was out of position for the third goal. It was a nightmarish performance for him. Now, Messi was aided by some really good performances as well. I thought Tagliafico really changed the game in the first half. The first half looked like it would be 0-0 at best for Argentina. Croatia was controlling the game before the penalty until Argentina started to overload that left side with their left back Tagliafico. And that was when they really started to have some problems because Messi was drifting to the left as well. And when you had Messi and Tagliafico as well as their midfield and striker drifting to the left, they just were not adjusting, and they were not able to get Messi off the ball, which, hey, look, they're not the first. And that was just causing a lot of issues. And then Alvarez drew that penalty, and it really felt like, oh no, this could be where it goes downhill, and it did. And so, that Argentina wins 3-0 and puts themselves in the final versus either Morocco or France, with a big match ahead now. Who knows who will win? I'm releasing this episode. I'm recording this episode before the match. The result will already be out, so I don't want to preview France or Monaco. I will say that versus France, I think I would expect France to be the favorite. France is a better, more talented team. They also are one of the only teams in the tournament with the star power to equal or be greater than Argentina. If Morocco makes it, I think it's a foregone conclusion that Argentina wins. I don't see how Messi and Alvarez would not absolutely dissect Morocco's defense similarly to Croatia. Now, Croatia's a bit sharper, Morocco's a bit sharper than Croatia in attack. So that game could go anyway, who knows. But if I had to put numbers on it, I'd say maybe 60-40 France if France makes it, 95-5 Argentina if Argentina makes it. So I'm hoping France makes it because I want a great final. But it's a weird situation because I'd love for Morocco to win it. I just know they won't if they make it there. But going to be looking forward to that. By the time next episode comes around, both the semifinal and the final have happened. We'll have a recap of both next time around. But for now, appreciate everybody tuning in. This has been week 4 of the Red Zone podcast. Hope you enjoyed. Tune in next Wednesday. Thank you, everybody.